In today's show, the Blazers just blew up the Lakers, and Portland made a trade prioritizing more flexibility in the offseason. Welcome to Locked On Blazers. Let's get into it.
You are Locked On Trailblazers, your daily Portland Trailblazers podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What up, world? It's your past first point guard and Trailblazer reporter, Mike Richmond. Listen to another episode of Locked On Blazers, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, available wherever you get podcasts and now also on YouTube. Subscribe to the YouTube channel if you haven't already. Also, thanks for making Locked On Blazers your first listen every day. It's free on all platforms, 5 days a week, coming at you every single weekday, the only daily Trailblazers podcast. So make it your first listen, part of daily routine, and tell your friends to do the same. In today's show, we're talking about a basketball game I thought we were going to avoid, quite frankly. And then the Blazers made a trade, acquiring Elijah Hughes, Joe Ingles, and a second-round pick, and prioritizing some flexibility, more cap space in the offseason. We'll talk about that, and then how to root for the Blazers down the stretch now that it looks like they are truly, truly headed towards an aggressive tank. In case you had any curiosity of where they were headed, that's where they're going. But the tank job took a little sideways step with a legitimately fun win on Wednesday evening. I want to talk about the game. Blazers beat the Lakers in one of the most entertaining games of the season and surprising wins of the season. I didn't think we were going to talk about this. I map out these episodes in my notebook. If for those of you watching on YouTube, there's the notebook, handwritten, baby. But I didn't. The Blazers lost last night to the Orlando Magic. We didn't talk about it. We talked about the CJ McCollum trade. It wasn't in the show. Magic are the worst team in the league. The Blazers lost the worst team in the league. We just let it go. They're playing the Lakers tonight. The Lakers looked really bad last night. I thought LeBron and Anthony Davis were going to rebound and smoke the Blazers, and we're just going to ignore this one too, right? We're just going to say, okay, they lost, but that's not the news of the day. The news of the day is the trade. We're going to move on. And then they shocked the world. So let's get into it. Fastest recap in the West. 107-105. Blazers beat the Lakers. The Lakers stink. They stink. They stink. I'll say it again. They stink. LA led by 7 at half, but Portland had only made 1 of 13 from 3. They were just going to make a few more shots. And by only down 7, 1 of 13 from 3, you knew they were kind of vaguely in the game. Only down 2 at the end of 3 quarters. And then what do? Blev God takes over. Keljin Blevins hits the 2 biggest shots of his NBA career, 2 huge threes early in the fourth quarter to give the Blazers the lead. Damian Lillard pops off the bench, as excited as I've seen him in months. He hasn't been at a bunch of games. He started coming back to games this week as he gets a little bit healthier, but he's not super animated in these games. He's watching a bad team lose. When his cousin, Keljin Blevins, on a 2-way contract, steps into back-to-back 3-pointers from the right, the second one from the right wing, Dame popped up off the bench. He flexed. He yelled. He screamed. He met him at midcourt as Frank Vogel and the Lakers were taking a timeout, and the Blazers had a lead. Portland down 2 at the end of 3 quarters, led by as many as 7 in the fourth quarter. But the Lakers, who are in theory a good basketball team, in practice, they stink. I'll say it again. They came all the way back, took the lead by 1 at 2 separate occasions. But in that second time they took the lead, you know who answered? Anfernee Simons, who was fantastic in this game. He hit 2 3-pointers in the final 3 minutes, including a second one with 1 minute and 50 seconds left, coming off a Dennis Smith Jr. steal to put the Blazers up 5. The Lakers couldn't overcome it. A missed shot by LeBron, an offensive foul by Talen Horton-Tucker. And then after the Lakers did cut the lead to 5, 1 defensive possession, they let it play out. Justice Winslow takes a left wing 3, misses it, and the Lakers don't grab the rebound because they're a bad team that does bad stuff. They're bad. The Lakers stink. Blazers get the ball, get the offensive board, an embarrassing offensive rebound, but the Blazers get the board. Anfernee Simons hits 2 free throws. LeBron hits a 3 at the buzzer to make it look closer than it was, and that's your fastest recap in the West. Blazers win 107-105. Anfernee Simons, probably the best player on the court. LeBron was pretty darn good. Didn't play a lot of defense, but he's pretty darn good. Ant finished with 29 points and 5 assists. Kind of a slow start to this one, but when he got going, he delivered. He was fantastic late. Yusuf Nurkic, 19-12 to go with 3 assists. Justice Winslow, I thought he was fantastic in this game. I thought he was really, really good. You can see that Justice Winslow can be a player. Is he a starting player in the league? No, but like he could play. He's He defended LeBron, finished with 11 points, 8 boards, 3 assists, 4 steals. Dennis Smith Jr. came off the bench, closed this game, finished with 7 points, 11 boards, and 6 steals. Pickpocketed LeBron twice in the fourth quarter. CJ Elleby played 43 minutes in the game. That a healthy Lakers team, only missing Russell Westbrook and Carmelo Anthony, but a healthy Lakers team with 2 of their Hall of Famers, and Anthony Davis and LeBron James. Anthony Davis maybe shouldn't make the Hall of Fame. He's one of closing in on one of the most overrated careers that we've seen. Shouldn't have been the NBA's top 75. People were hating on Dame for that. He's not even the most outrageous name in his own draft class. That'd be the number 1 pick in the 2012 draft, Anthony Davis, who just straight up is no way he's one of the best 75 players in the history of the league. No freaking way. Did not attempt a shot in the fourth quarter. AD, come on, dog. You stink. So do the Lakers. The Lakers stink. CJ Elleby played 43 minutes in this one. Greg Brown, second straight double-digit scoring night off the bench. He finished with 11, hit a huge 3 in the fourth quarter. Listen, LeBron had 30. Anthony Davis had 17. Taylor Horton-Tucker, 14 and 7, and 7 assists off the bench. Stanley Johnson had 11 off the bench. The Lakers stink. That's the takeaway from this one. Here's my other takeaway. The Blazers are supposed to lose, and they're going to lose a bunch of games. They're not a good basketball team. This exact same roster, literally this exact same roster, because a couple of the new guys weren't available, still aren't available. They held Eric Bledsoe out again, et cetera, et cetera. We'll talk about that later in the show. But this exact same roster got throttled by the Orlando Magic last night in this building. The Lakers were coming off a bad loss to the Milwaukee Bucks. They come in here from LA. They also got throttled, but they lost to a legitimately good team, a team that can win the NBA title. The Blazers lost to the team with the worst record in the NBA. The Lakers, they fancy themselves like, oh, maybe we'll get healthy and make a push. Maybe they don't fancy themselves that anymore. They stink. This was just truly embarrassing for the Lakers. But what I'm saying is, I got off track hating on the Lakers again. The Blazers are going to lose a bunch of games. So anyone telling you that this is actually bad for the tank job, screw that. The Blazers need joy. This was a joyful, legitimately fun game. The arena was rocking. Damian Lillard was having fun. Kelton Blevins was making important 3-pointers. Dennis Smith Jr. was making plays. Greg Brown was playing fourth quarter minutes against LeBron freaking James. Like, this was fun. You need fun. Even tanking teams, even the truly terrible teams need fun wins. This was a fun win. Do not let ping pong balls cloud you from enjoying this one. They'll lose a bunch of games the rest of the week, the rest of this week, the rest of the way, whatever it is. Like, they'll lose on Saturday to the Knicks, probably. The Knicks are also bad. Never know. But enjoy this one. Enjoy a fun game, and allow yourself to enjoy this game, and don't be soured by whatever Jabari Smith Jr. Dreams. I know I may be talking to a straw man, but I heard it on the post-game radio show that maybe this win isn't good. No. This win is fun and good. Be brave enough to enjoy something. This win was really, really, really fun. So yeah. Enjoy it. The Lakers stink. It's fun when the Lakers stink. Beat LA. All right. I wasn't going to talk about this game at all. Now I'm getting fired up because of how embarrassing the Lakers were and how genuinely enjoyable this Blazer game was. Genuinely enjoyable. But the news that I was going to lead the show with, the Blazers made a trade involved in a 3-team deal involving the Utah Jazz and the San Antonio Spurs. The Blazers send away two players they got in the deal, the CJ McCollum deal from the New Orleans Pelicans, and they get back a second-round pick and a couple guys who are probably not going to be contributors. Let's talk about the direction this team is headed to close the show. But before we do that, tell about betonline.net, the fastest and easiest way to bet on all your sports action. It is Super Bowl weekend, the biggest betting weekend of the year here in the United States. I would wager the biggest betting weekend in the hemisphere, quite frankly, if not on the globe. It's just a fun time to get in on the action. They have tons of lines, tons of props, tons of odds for everything to do with football's championship game, with the National Football League's championship game. But if you don't want to bet on the NFL, they got pro and college hoops, they got hockey, they got all the Olympics, they got combat sports, they got soccer, they got tennis, whatever it is. Find all your action at betonline.net. That's BetOnline, where the game starts. All right. Let's keep it rolling. One more time. The Lakers stink. They stink. They stink. This team stinks. And I think they're going to make a whole bunch of trades. They might even fire their coach because they lost this game. They stink. But the news we were going to lead the show with is that the Blazers made a trade today. Relatively minor in the grand scheme of things. The last two trades they've made, sending out Norman Powell and Robert Covington, CJ McCollum and Larry Nance Jr. and Tony Snell. These were regular rotation guys, 3 starters, 4 rotation players. Within that CJ McCollum trade, and I missed this and I apologize, they also waived Cody Zeller. When I recorded the CJ McCollum reaction show, the trade wasn't official yet, so I didn't know that, but I apologize. Cody Zeller, no longer a Blazer. His Blazers career ended less than 1 season. But the Blazers made a slightly smaller trade this time, not an end of an era, unless the era was Tomas Satoransky and Nickeil Alexander-Walker, who did not ever play for this team. This is a separate trade. It's not part of a larger trade, but Satoransky is headed to the San Antonio Spurs. Nickeil Alexander-Walker is headed to the Jazz, and the Blazers in return are getting Joe Ingles and his $14 million expiring contract, and Elijah Hughes and his $1.5 million expiring contract, and a 2022 second round pick from the Memphis Grizzlies. Joe Ingles is 34 years old. He tore his ACL. He's never going to play for the Portland Trail Blazers. He's probably never going to come to Portland in this trade. I don't think there would be any reason that he needs to come here. It's just facilitating the Jazz saving some tax money and giving them a young player, Nickeil Alexander-Walker. Elijah Hughes probably will come here. He's an expiring contract, a former second round pick. I know him because he went to Syracuse and lit up Carolina a couple times, but he might even play down the stretch like a 6'5" wing, 2-3 wing. He will likely be here and at least part of the roster. I don't know if he'll play regularly. We'll see. Well, that remains to be seen. He'll probably make his debut, will be available to make his debut Saturday when the Blazers play the New York Knicks. But what this was about was prioritizing money in the summertime over Nickeil Alexander-Walker. Tomas Satoransky was, Satoransky and Nickeil Alexander-Walker were 2 of the 4 players the Blazers got in the CJ McCollum trade. They were rerouted, and these trades were allowed to go through because their deals weren't aggregated. The CBA stuff doesn't matter as much here, but the Blazers gave up on Nickeil Alexander-Walker, a guy he'll be on his final year of his rookie deal next season, and would pay him about $5 million. And instead, the Blazers will have that cap space next summer. So what they're prioritizing is the F word, is flexibility. What the Blazers could do, what the Blazers will have the option to do now that this trade has gone through, right? And they've added $5 million to the cap space, is that depending on what they do with Josh Hart, who has a late guarantee date at the end of June, the Blazers can decide whether to pick up his deal for about $13 million and whether to decide to bring Jusuf Nurkic back. Nurkic, an unrestricted free agent. If he walks, he can do that on his own, but the Blazers have his bird rights. They can go over the cap to sign him. So conceivably the Blazers will be one of the few teams with like real money to offer Nurk, just because there aren't that many teams out there with big time cap space who would be after a center necessarily. It could happen, and we'll talk about it when we get there. But depending on the decisions made with Josh Hart and Jusuf Nurkic, the Blazers could have anywhere from 0 cap dollars to about 33-ish. My math might be a little off there, but north of 30, less than 35 million, right in the range of between 30 and 35 million dollars in cap space, depending on the decisions of Nurk and Josh Hart. And so what the Blazers are doing is they're prioritizing that. They're prioritizing the ability to create a big chunk of cap space. And you might say, Mike, I looked at the free agent class and it stinks. It's the Lakers of free agency. It's a potential Brad Beal opt-out. Sure. Intriguing, but maybe not my Huckleberry when you have Ant and Damian Lillard on the roster. It's DeAndre Ayton, who's a restricted free agent, and it's Miles Bridges, who's a restricted free agent. Whatever you offer DeAndre Ayton, the Suns are probably going to match and bring him back. Whatever you offer Miles Bridges, the Hornets are going to offer and bring him back. And then it gets really light. Are they going to lure Zach LaVine away from a really good Bulls team to, again, be a small forward on a team that's like committed to 2 guards? Like, free agency is not the way the Blazers are headed. People who are, I saw, I'll call him out by name. I saw Antonio Daniels talking about this on NBA TV, saying like, are the Blazers gonna be able to, prove that a non-glamour market can sign free agents? No. That's not their plan. No, they're not going to chase free agents. What they're doing is they're clearing up cap space in order to be available to take on a large contract in an unbalanced trade. Is that contract Ben Simmons? Maybe. Is that contract James Harden? Maybe. I mean, if you're rooting for either of those two, like probably the best two disgruntled players out there in the league, you really don't want Philly and Brooklyn to make a James Harden and Ben Simmons swap this week. But that's what the Blazers are going to do. That's what their plan is. They're going to set up this. They're setting themselves up to have the ability to have, somewhere between zero. And if they can choose between Nurk and Hart, and maybe in the summer have $15-ish million in cap space to absorb a smaller contract, or as much as $30 million to absorb like basically a max contract slot. If they make it happen, $30 million plus another player, Blazers can absorb a max contract, easy peasy. So that's what they're not setting themselves up to be a player in free agency. They're setting themselves up to have cap space to be a player in the trade market. But I will say this, that's best case scenario, right? Is that they have this money. They've made this trade to get a 2022 second round pick and cap space. That's what they did. This is just cap maneuvering, right? Get cap space, get a free draft pick for Nickeil Alexander-Walker, who is probably never part of your plan anyways. It doesn't preclude them rebuilding. This does not stop them from going another direction. Like I still believe, and I think the generous read is like they're setting themselves up to be available for a Ben Simmons, James Harden type trade. Certainly true. I think they are, right? Like, but it doesn't mean that gets done. It takes two to tango. It takes probably Philly and Brooklyn not making a trade literally tomorrow, or as you're listening to this right friggin' now, that could happen like literally at this moment. Or this is Thursday, February 10th show. This is literally deadline day's show. We will have a show recapping the deadline on Friday, but the Blazers, if they aren't able to land those big fish, or say those guys happen and that trade happens, those guys are maybe not available, or they're entrenched in their teams, their new teams, and the Blazers, can still absorb another big contract. Should a Julius Randle become available? Should whatever it might be across the league, should any big money contract become available? If LeBron James decides he's like, he knows the Lakers stink. He listened to the podcast. He heard the first segment. He's like, the Lakers do stink. Get me the hell out of here. The Blazers would have this cap space to absorb a big old contract. But if they don't do that, the twin paths are still available. They can go be good, or they can be bad. They could still pull the plug. I don't think they will, but I'm saying like both paths are available. If it doesn't work out and Dame asks out, again, don't think it will happen, but they've allowed themselves the flexibility, the F word, to go either direction. The twin paths of true rebuild for multi-seasons, be bad for multi-years and try to build back up, or make a big swing. This trade today, the Nickeil Alexander-Walker swap, allows the Blazers that. It allows them that path where they're committed if it's available to be really good, and if it's not, to try to be really good again. And if that trade is not available and their own superstar, whatever franchise cornerstone starts, asks for another direction, they can pull the plug and they can be bad and they can enter a multi-season rebuild. The cap space is only pretty much valuable to the Blazers as a trade asset, but with so few teams next year projected to have cap space, it does make the Blazers one of the few true destinations for trades, for absorbing contracts, for all of those things, which makes them players around the draft to be a trade, to be a team to receive assets in a trade, and through free agency to receive assets in a trade so other teams can maneuver and make moves. This flexibility is a good thing. It doesn't guarantee anything, but I think this is a good thing. If this was the direction they were going to go, I think they're still set up to be in a good spot. And regardless of what happens with that flexibility, it's Dame and Ant and Nas and probably Josh Hart and Nurk. That's like a good group. Plus 2 lottery picks if they keep the Pelicans pick. Like, they're in an okay spot. Speaking of the spot they're in, they won tonight, but they're going to do a lot of losing. So What are you rooting for? Here's a hater's guide to tanking. We'll do that to close the show. Here's where are my haters at? Here's what you're rooting for if you want to root for your team to lose and the right teams to win around them. But before we do that, let me tell you about rockauto.com. The family business has been serving do-it-yourselfers for over 20 years, and they're making it easy. You can save time and money when you use Rock Auto. And I'm talking a whole bunch of money, like 30, 50, even 100% as much as if you go to the dealership or you go to a big chain auto parts store. If you go to a big chain auto parts store, they just physically cannot carry enough parts to meet your needs. The good thing about rockauto.com is they've got an easy to use, easy to navigate website and everything for every make and model out there. So you'll be able to find what you need, get it quickly, and save some money. So why not head over to their website right now, rockauto.com, see all the parts available for your car or truck. And while you're there, why don't you tell them who sent you? And write Locked On in their "How did you hear about us" box. That way they know where you came from. It's rockauto.com. Amazing selection, reliably low prices, all the parts your car will ever need. Still a pass first point guard. Still Mike Richmond. You are still listening to Locked On Blazers. Here's the hater's guide to tanking. First, let's talk about what the Blazers got. Yesterday's show, and I apologize for the timing of this, it's just how it worked out. The Blazers hadn't announced a trade until I'd already recorded the podcast. So the specifics of the trade had to wait for 24 hours. And I kind of say it tongue in cheek, but I genuinely want I want this to be the place where you get your best info. I didn't have all the info when I hit record yesterday, but now I do. So the details on the CJ McCollum trade give us a little more insight. And we learned this from the Blazers press release. So this one was given to us by the team. So the Blazers get a first round pick from the Pelicans. And that pick is for 2022, and it's protected 5 through 14, which means if it falls in the top 4 picks, 1 through 4, New Orleans gets to keep it. If it's between pick 5 and 14, it's the Blazers. The Blazers get it. If it's in that mid lottery, the Blazers get it. If it's outside of 14, it goes to the Charlotte Hornets. And here's what happens. If it is either one of the top 4 picks or 15 or higher, if it's outside the lottery and the Pelicans make the playoffs, more on that in a moment, then that pick becomes a 2025 Milwaukee Bucks pick. And that's worse because the Milwaukee Bucks are going to be good in 2025. So it's going to be a deep pick. You really, really need the Pelicans to miss the playoffs this year. You need them to either miss the play-in altogether or get booted out of the play-in. If the Pelicans end up 8th, it is legitimately bad news for the Portland Trailblazers. You are watching CJ McCollum is going to make his debut on Thursday in New Orleans. It's going to be weird to watch him in a different jersey. I feel like I was maybe unemotional about CJ's exit, just like not like in this podcast, I'm not like bragging about that. I'm saying like it didn't like touch me like, oh, it's going to be so sad. I think I might get a little emotional. I think I'll have I will feel some feelings when I see CJ wear a different jersey. It will be weird to me. It's like truly strange to see him wear a Pelicans jersey. But if you are rooting for the Blazers to keep that draft pick, and quite frankly, if you're listening to the show, you probably are, you need CJ and the Pelicans to lose a whole bunch of basketball games. You can't be feeling like, oh, good for CJ. It's got to be bad for CJ. You need the Pelicans to lose. You need them to miss the playoffs. Not bottom out. Like you don't need them to have some bad stuff happen and then truly bottom out. You just need to straight up miss the playoffs and give the Blazers the 11th pick in the draft. That is, or the 5th pick in the draft if you're really being greedy, but like you need them to desperately miss the playoffs. That is extremely important. The other information we got from that trade, the other some important news or noteworthy information is that it reported the Blazers got 2 second-round picks in that deal, but they didn't really get 2 extra second-round picks. What they got was the right to swap for the better of between New Orleans and Portland's picks in 26 and 27. So they didn't get a surplus of picks. They don't have extra picks. They just, when it comes up in the 2026 draft, whoever has a higher pick in the second round, that will be Portland's. Portland, New Orleans. Portland gets the better pick, a better second rounder in 26 and 27. So not extra picks. They don't have extra picks to wheel and deal. They just have the more desirable of those 2 picks in the future. So the Blazers still end up with they have 2 second rounders in 2022, 1 in 2025, and then they still keep 20, 26, 27, and so on outward from there. So this is, then it's not, they didn't exactly rack up a whole bunch of second rounders, which I thought they had at one point, but that's like, by the time that rolls around, you won't be like, oh man, they got ripped off in the CJ McCollum deal. It's just like a news stuff to know. So the other big news in the haters' guide to rooting for the Portland Trailblazers to get a high draft pick and 2 high draft picks, 2 lottery picks, Dame, Ant, CJ, Nas, Josh Hart, Nurk, and 2 lottery picks. That sounds like a team that could compete for the playoffs. Not a really good team, but that sounds like the 7th best team in the West or something like that, or at least competitive in that range. And that's before they add anyone else, right? You're rooting that the Sacramento Kings got this stuff right. The Kings went for it. They traded for Domantas Sabonis. They traded Tyrese Halliburton for Domantas Sabonis. And Tomas, son of a legend. Many Blazer fans, many of you have sent me emails and tweets saying that you wish that Sabonis was a Blazer. Maybe you're right, dear listener, and that he's a baller. And you better hope that the Kings got this right, because they're going all in and they're trying to make the play and trying to make the playoffs. They are pushing for it. This is exactly what the plan was designed to do. It was designed to make teams like New Orleans trade for CJ McCollum, despite being in 10th place in the West, and designed for teams like Sacramento, who are literally the 12th place team in the West when they made a trade, to go for it. Add a 2-time All-Star from the Pacers and push the chips in to go for it. Like chase it down, because the plan gives you more outlets to get there. And quite frankly, the Lakers stink. So it's not like that's not a scary team. It's right there for both those teams. If you are rooting, like the haters' guide is go Kings, boo Pelicans, and Blazers. One win maybe every 6 games or so, like this. The Blazers had a 6-game losing streak, beat the Lakers. That's perfect. Lose 6, have 1 win for the vibes, 1 win for the positivity, 1 win for the good feels, 1 win for beating the Lakers who suck, and keep on losing. That gives the Blazers an opportunity to, be one of the worst teams in the league. They still have a relatively good shot at having a top 4 pick. Most draft experts think this draft is pretty top heavy, but if you get a top 4 pick and you get the 7th pick in the draft and you're armed with potentially $30 million in cap space, this rebuild can move quick. And the point was for this to be a pivot, not to be a full teardown. The Blazers obviously still are in the teardown range. The roster's totally imbalanced and bizarre for now, but they've set themselves up to quickly retool in the summertime and retool around Dame if that's the move. They've kept all of that open. So you need the Pelicans to lose, you need the Kings to win, and you need the Blazers to keep on losing, except maybe when it's at the expense of one of America's great overrated basketball players, Anfernee Davis. Yeah, I'm a hater. I think AD's good. He sucked tonight. He's been pretty underwhelming this year. Maybe I don't think AD's good. Why am I backtracking? He stinks. Lakers stink. Tonight's game was fun. I had fun watching a bad Blazers team. There's not much more you can ask for than watching Greg Brown and Keljin Blevins and 43 minutes of CJ LB beat LeBron James. It's the best player I've probably ever seen play basketball. So no apologies. The tank train's still on. That's your haters' guide for how to get there. That's what the Blazers got. That's what the Blazers trade assets are. Now you have the details on that. Tomorrow's a big day in the NBA. You may have heard. Noon West Coast time, the Blazers play. That is the trade deadline. So all morning tomorrow here in Portland, there's going to be big moves happening. Blazers could conceivably make a big move. They are armed certainly to do that. And there's been some rumors that they're eyeing Jeremy Grant pretty heavily. Some reporting that they're still, from Jake Fisher of Bleacher Report, that they are after Jeremy Grant pretty heavily. He certainly could be a Blazer next time we record the show, literally tomorrow. He could be a Portland Trailblazer. They could make other minor moves. They don't have much else to ship out, but conceivably, Eric Bledsoe did not play tonight. Josh Hart did not play tonight for rest. He'll make his debut Saturday unless they trade him. Josh Hart didn't play because Chauncey Billups said he flew 5 hours a day of the game, and they're just going to hold him out because he's just like a long flight. The generous read is that that's true. the more skeptical read is that you're suspicious and say, oh, are they potentially using Josh Hart in a trade? We'll see. But there's going to be a whole bunch of movement tomorrow across the league. I believe there's going to be, certainly the Blazers are going to do something else with Eric Bledsoe's contract. They can move Elijah Hughes again. They can move Josh Hart. They can move Didi Louzada, who they got in the Pelicans trade. They can move Eric Bledsoe, whose name is already mentioned in this rundown, but like they're armed with action. And so Friday show, come back and we'll talk about what happened. We'll talk about what happened across the league. We'll kind of stack up where the Blazers are in the tank race. We'll stack up where they are, in the sort of Western Conference arms race, in the NBA arms race. Who got better? Who got worse? What's the direction of all the teams in the league? We'll recap all of it here. Also, the Locked On NBA feed is going to have a deadline show for you on the YouTube page. So if you on their YouTube page, our YouTube page, if you haven't subscribed to Locked On NBA on YouTube, check that out now, because we will have you covered with all the folks like me who cover their teams closely around the league, giving you the unique insight that really only our network can do. Local experts all over the country on what each team is doing. So check that out on YouTube and come back tomorrow for the show. It's going to be a ton of fun. It's a huge day in the NBA on the heels of a legitimately fun Blazer win. Doesn't get much better than this. Tell your friends about the show. Tell them to look for it wherever they get podcasts. Appreciate you listening. Talk to you soon.